Lots of welds that are far from perfect, but as a prototype, I think it turned out pretty good. There's a few things I would like to change, and I may later, but we're going to give this a whirl. There's the bars to keep that screen from getting just beat all to heck. I think we're about ready for our maiden voyage on this thing. Okay, so we're about ready to fire this thing up for the first time, and I apologize for the sun. It's pretty high in the sky, so you're going to get a lot of shadow on my face, but that's the way it is. So there could be a lot of grinding done to improve some of the welds. We'll put it that way. My welding helmet, I'm not going to make too many excuses. Welding's one of those perishable skills. If you don't use it very often, you kind of start over. You don't exactly start completely over, but it takes you a while to get back in the swing of things. But my welding helmet is not helping matters at all. I think I bought that thing at Harbor Freight, and it's doing this thing where it darkens super dark and then gets really light to where it almost blinds you, and then it just keeps going back and forth as you're welding. It makes it really hard to weld consistently. So enough of that. So this thing, we're to the point I want to give it a quick try before I start grinding and doing all that stuff to make things look a little better. The one thing I'm really concerned about is it sucking air through this and pushing air out through the output over there. I've seen several people on YouTube say that the side output's better than the bottom. We're going to try that out. I'm hoping with those big fins in there, it does create a fan motion in there, and we'll blow that out. If there's not enough air movement through there, that side output's not going to work worth a darn. So that's the main thing I want to try here today. I'm going to fire this thing up, just make sure it doesn't rattle itself to death. The shaft did seem fairly balanced when I welded that thing up. It didn't seem too out of balance at all, so we'll see how that works out. There's some improvements. I'll probably talk about those later that I would do on version 2 if I ever made another one of these. This is kind of my prototype to see if, how this thing works. But it's kind of a down and dirty, let's give it a try kind of a thing. So with that, let's dump some gas into it and see what happens. catastrophic failure. Okay, let me show you what happened. Oh. So the Lovejoy connector broke. As you can see, that's just cast material. And I think what happened is the engine was getting, up to speed there a little bit. This thing has a terrible amount of flywheel capacity to it. And so I think when the engine sputtered there a little bit, when the choke was on, it just snapped that thing right off. This thing had momentum to it. The flywheel effect just made that snap. These are, I don't know where those things are made. I got it from Surplus Center, so obviously that didn't last too long. I think I saw the key, which I kept referring to as a Woodruff key, but it's not. It's just a key. Fly out here. There it is, right there. So it didn't shear the key off, but that thing sure as heck broke on me. I don't know if I've got another one of these, but we'll look. Bummer. Well, there we go. I ordered extra. Do we dare give that a try? I have a feeling we're going to just snap another one of these. Heck, let's give it a try. That was not totally unexpected. My original thought on this was to put a belt drive on it. Then I changed my mind and went to these Lovejoy connectors. I think that may have been a mistake. We'll find out. Chinesium. That doesn't help anything either. Well, let's see if the next high quality Chinese part will hold up. That's the first time I've ever had one of those connectors fail on me. Well, yeah. The other one I had, it's similar, but it's an older style. They're built quite a bit different. It was made out of aluminum. It was on an old hydraulic pump on a wood splitter. I had one of those fail once. But the reason it failed was the rubber wasn't in there, so it had a lot of room to slap in it. It just destroyed itself. Okay, should we try it again? I don't know if we'll have any different results, but we'll try it. I am going to have to make some hickory handles. I don't think this wood's going to hold up very long. Okay, I think I found one of the problems anyway. Before, this thing, if you'd spin it around, it would wind up tilted about a 45-degree angle. And I started adding weights out here, and there's almost, 3/4 of a pound or so of weight right out here to balance it. So back there, I put a piece of spring steel. It's about 5/8 thick or so, and tack welded it on there to begin with, and then played around with this to see where it would wind up. I've got it disconnected from the motor right now, and that seems to be fairly well balanced. So I was about a pound out of balance. So I'm hoping that will kind of balance it out a little bit. Then I went ahead and welded it firm on there. And it'll make another nice breaker bar back there. It'll catch about where the rocks come in. So I was going to put it out here, and then I changed my mind and put it back there. I think it'll do more good back there. So let's give this another go. So I'm in the process of editing this video, and I thought I'd better jump in here while it's still kind of fresh in my head and clear up a couple things that I'm seeing during the edit on this video. The number one thing that popped into my head was making this little cover for the screen where the output of the machine would be. Why in the world I just didn't take that piece of that 1/8 inch plate, I got that sheet, and just cut a hole in it and use that instead of cutting strips and welding those together. I think what had happened is, in my mind, I was going to go pick up some strap steel and build it that way out of just some strap steel. But for some reason, that didn't translate when I thought about using this 1/8 inch plate that I had. For some reason, in my mind, I should still use pieces of strap. So I wound up cutting strips and then welding them together instead of just cutting the square out and cutting a hole in the middle of it. It's weird how your mind just does things. You don't even think about it. You just kind of go on autopilot, and that's exactly what I did there. I had a plan in my head that I was going to use strap steel, so I used strap steel, even though I had a perfect other option there. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to jump on real quick was staying out of the plane of rotation. In the video, you can kind of see I'm being pretty careful to stay out of the plane of rotation. You got objects rotating like this. If something's going to fail, it's going to come out somewhere along that plane of rotation. And I try my best to stay the heck out of that plane of rotation. And for obvious reasons, you saw those Lovejoy connectors fail. They didn't come out at really high speed, but you still want to stay out of that plane of rotation. And the reason I'm pretty spooky about it, it goes back quite a long time ago to a story involving snowmobiles and reassembling kind of Frankensteining a bunch of different sleds together to make a running sled. We'll go into that story some other time, but I've got a healthy respect for the plane of rotation. On one of the other videos, somebody had mentioned not welding on the shaft for the paddles and everything. And this, I really didn't do weld on the shaft. I mentioned the shaft had slightly warped. I didn't weld directly onto the shaft. There's those two couplings on each end. There's a piece of pipe in between those that are welded on. I think it was just the heat from welding that 3/8 steel to that pipe. It just got that shaft fairly hot. There's nothing welded directly to that shaft. If I really had to, I could take those parts that center the hammer assembly off of that shaft. I think it would be with a fair amount of difficulty, but I think you could get it off there if you need to, if I need to redesign it. Which leads me to one of the things I would change on this. As you saw, I'm just using, I can't remember if it's 1/2 or 5/8 rod to connect the swinging hammers to the center part. If I had that to do over again, I'd probably use 1 inch rod through there. It's not caused any problem yet, but I can see that as a potential failure point. I just kind of used what I had on hand. I tried to find some heavier walled tubing to use. None of the local welding shops had any, so I just wound up using what we could get a hold of. That would be one design change I would make, is make that hinge point a little bit heavier. The other thing that I really didn't touch on was these two bars that I installed in here, or welded in place, kind of beater bars. I didn't want them directly in the bottom because I'm not 100% sure that that output would work where it was at, so I didn't want to weld a bar right where I may need to put an output on the bottom of that thing. But that's the reason those are there, is just a nice spot to have material hit up against to create some more hammer points in there essentially. Now the fan function, while I did have it operating there for those few minutes, I had two problems. One, I didn't really catch very well on camera. One, those cheap Lovejoy connectors wanted to vibrate apart constantly. I tightened those set screws just as tight as I possibly could get them without stripping them. And within 5-6 minutes of running, they would vibrate enough that those Lovejoy connectors would start to slip apart. I caught it the second and third time, and I thought that's what happened the fourth time when it exploded the second time, but they were both in position. It just failed. So that was another problem I had, the vibration between the motor and this big flywheel out there. So using Lovejoy type connectors on this particular project, a complete failure as far as I'm concerned. There's just way too much weight out there on that flywheel. Anytime you drop a rock in there or anything and it wants to try and, you got this big massive weight turning around in there and the motor's trying to do its thing. I think because of the amount of weight I've got out there in that flywheel, that thing must weigh 15, 20 pounds, I'm guessing. So if the Lovejoy connector doesn't fail or a keyway doesn't shear, I think you're going to have a failure on the motor. You're going to, that big flywheel spinning around out there, you got a backfire on the motor or something, and I think it's just going to shear a rod or something in that motor sooner or later. So I'm completely given up on that setup completely. That's out the door now. We're not going to use the Lovejoy style connectors. Now, a couple friends of mine who work on this kind of stuff quite a bit, I posted a couple pictures on either Facebook or Instagram, and they immediately said, hey, you should try one of these style connectors, which they look great. There's a big piece of rubber in there that kind of acts as a slush box in between there. I think that might work, maybe, but that connector was also $400. That's more than I've got in this whole project. So I didn't want to go that route. So thanks for the suggestion, but we're not going to spend $400 on one connector and for something that may or may not work. Okay, there's two more comments I want to discuss real quick that I had on some of the other videos. One was somebody thought I might have problems starting this with that big weight out there, the big hammers out there. And I was also concerned about that. They thought I may need a clutch in there. As you can see from pull starting it really didn't have much effect. It's harder to get it moving, but once you've got it moving, it's kind of like one of those old style tractors. Once you get that flywheel moving out there, it kind of helps the process along a little bit. The motor does start fairly decent with it. So that was a concern of mine as well, but it was proven to be not a real concern. So the last thing I want to address real quick off the other videos was the spacing between the hammers, the impact points, and the outside of the mill. I think several people commented, make it real tight, under a 1/4 inch. And my original intent after reading those was probably because I wanted those slats in there, make it about a 1/2 inch. Well, that's not what happened at all. After doing some modern day math and screwing up the calculation somewhere, I wound up with those about an inch, almost an 1.5 inches off of the outside wall. I thought that's going to be a really big problem. I really screwed up on this math. I don't know what I did, but that was not the original intent. And as you could see, when I threw that rock in there and it beat around, those things spun around there for quite a while, even after the Lovejoy connector broke. I was like, man, this is not going to work out well. Look how much rock it left behind. But you'll see later in the video that it turned out way better than expected. Well, what'd you guys think of the results so far? Honestly, for me, I'm extremely happy with the results. It was way better than I was expecting, with the bars so far away from that outside wall, the hammers being so far away. I wasn't expecting great results. I was expecting to find a lot of bigger chunks left over in the bottom of the mill that, you know, I'd have to pull out and try and recrush again. But that hasn't been the case so far. That material I just ran was extremely hard material. I don't know what that was. I found that up on an old mine dump a number of years ago. It's extremely heavy when I picked it up. At first I thought it was some silver ore. I don't think that's what it is. It might be. It didn't have much gold in it. It had a few specks, but I mean specks. But I'm not really sure what that was. I don't think that old mine had a smelter of any kind, but that's kind of what it looked like, was maybe some leftover smelter material. It's obviously mainly iron, steel stuff, because this is what it looked like when I stuck a magnet to it. And this, I just filled the magnet up with this stuff, and I pull that off, and just almost all of it's magnetic. I'm not really sure what that was at that old mill site. Your guess is as good as mine. If you got a comment below. I mean, it was rusty. It looked like maybe possible ore, but I'm really not sure what that stuff was. But parts of it was extremely dense. That one piece that stopped that was, I just kept throwing bigger and bigger pieces in to see where the breaking point was. What can I crush with this thing that's got a 4x4 inch opening? You know, I was expecting maybe to be able to crush up to 2-inch material. And I just kept throwing bigger and bigger chunks in there. And I finally threw that big chunk of essentially solid iron material in there. And that finally did stop the mill. The belt drive did exactly what it was supposed to do. It slipped and acted as a clutch, so nothing broke. So I was extremely pleased with it. I should have went with the belt drive in the first place, as that was my original gut feeling on this, is it should be a belt drive. And it turned out to be right. I think the belt drive's working very well. And, you know, even that super hard material, it crushed it down into a very fine powder, 20 mesh or less. It's been working great. I did run some other material through it, about 150 pounds of some vein material that I dug up just a couple days before. And you'll see the results of that on another video. That's going to be a members only video, some of the results of some of the ore I've got sitting around here that we're going to process. Some of it's from some of your guys' sites that you invited me out to look at your mines, your claims. And you said I could pick up some ore samples, but I didn't have a good way to crush those samples down when I made those original videos. So I didn't include the results. And now I've got a way to crush those down. I'm going to include them in some upcoming videos. Again, those are going to be member-only videos. But so far, you know, running that 150 pounds of material through there, no problems. What I got left with, even though that material was pretty wet, it did bunch up some on the bottom of the mill. It was still dust. It wasn't big particles. It was just dust that was wet, and it kind of congealed there at the bottom. It was easy to get out, easy to clean up. I'm pretty happy with the results so far. Is there anything I would change with the mill today? Well, I've got about 4 hours of running with this thing now through varied materials. Some just for curiosity, I threw some granite through there. I threw some big pieces of like 3-inch by 4-inch pieces of quartz, just to see. I'm trying to find the breaking point. Where will this mill stop? What can I and can I not run through this and cause problems? And the quartz, the 3x4-inch quartz, it ran right through the mill and didn't even slow it down. The only thing that I found that's really slowed it down much was that ore that you just saw me run through, or whatever that stuff was. So I've been extremely happy with it so far. So far, with the current modifications to it, I wouldn't make any major changes right now. The bucket hanging off the output chute, that was not the original intent of that. I was going to put a little down chute down to a level where you could just slide a bucket underneath of it. But I actually like this setup quite a bit better, just hanging the bucket on there. And it's going to allow me to perform another project shortly down the road, which you'll see on another video. I think it's going to turn out pretty cool. Pretty good way to process the ore quickly. So you'll see that on an upcoming video as well. As always, thanks for watching, subscribing, giving us the thumbs up, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys on the next video.